Okay, we are ready to begin.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is our second meeting. It's great to see everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Community Engagement and Outreach Committee's June 3rd, 2021 meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with the CEOC members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in the federal, state, and local emergency. We are going to go ahead and do roll call. I believe all members are present with the exception of Tiffany Dow and Aaron Spalding. I'm just going to go down. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and ask Senior Planner Cal Chan, would you please provide instructions to the CEOC and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair Fennell and members of the CEOC. We're very happy to see you all this evening. Thank you for joining us. At this time, we ask that members of the CEOC please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You do have the ability to control your own webcams and microphones, and we just ask that you keep your microphones on mute when not speaking so as to avoid any cross sound. Staff will engage the webcams and microphones to make presentations and also respond to members of the CEOC. For members of the public who are joining us this evening and that wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. For those of you joining us from a landline or a cell phone, you can press *9 to raise your virtual hand. We will then see your raised hand on our side of the screen and have the ability to open your microphone so that you can provide your comment to the CEOC. That concludes our instructions, and I'll return the meeting back to you, Chair Fennell.
All right, we're going to get ready to start to open up with public comment. Under public comment, the public may address the CEOC on any subject not listed on the agenda. Address the CEOC once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The CEOC cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the CEOC cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Cal Chan, do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
Chair Fennell, may I just jump in real quick before Mr. Chan comes on? I do see 7 members of the, I know more members of the CEOC are present, but I see 7 cameras engaged. And in order for us to have a quorum, we need to have 8 members engaged with the cameras at this time. So I do ask if a member, thank you so much. Great, now we have a quorum. Thank you so much. Now, Mr. Chan.
Thank you. So as a reminder, if there's anyone in the audience today that would like to provide public comment, please press the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us by phone, please press *9. Give a moment for people to raise their hands. Okay, Chair Fennell, there is no public comment at this time. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we're going to get started with our regular business. And let me see here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Christina Paul to introduce the item and presentation.
Good evening, Chair and members of the CEOC. I'm Christina Paul. I am a consultant with M Group, and we are here to help facilitate the development of Menlo Park's housing element. So following up on our presentation a week ago with the first CEOC meeting, I'm going to launch our presentation and go through a quick overview of our community outreach approach and our project schedule. And then we're going to switch over to a different platform called Miro, which is a virtual whiteboard where we can record your impressions of our outreach plan that was part of the agenda packet. And please do feel free to stop me if you have any questions as I go. Now I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay, so I'm going to walk us through our community engagement and outreach plan. I do want to note just first that part of the packet, as I mentioned, was an outline of our community engagement plan. And this is something that is what we would call not baked yet. It's not done. This is one of our first and most important things that we need to develop as part of the housing element, is to figure out how we're going to engage the Menlo Park community, all different aspects of the community. And we really are looking forward to your feedback on this. This is one of the major reasons that this committee was assembled, was in fact to give us feedback on how to do outreach. So so this is a key moment for us, and we do want you to be very free to give us all of your thoughts and comments and so on. So with that, our engagement and outreach approach is intentionally very comprehensive, and it's made up of quite a few different aspects. And I'm just going to go through all of those at a pretty high level. So first of all, there are community meetings. Community meetings can take a lot of different forms. They can be open houses where folks are welcome to come through and look at different posters and respond to questions and chat with staff. They can also be a more traditional meeting, kind of like this one, where somebody will give a presentation and then we'll respond to questions and comments, or we might have great breakout groups for discussion. We can also, as we move through COVID appropriate behavior, begin to shift to different kinds of in-person meetings where we might be doing, group exercises or work on a board if that's appropriate. We are going to be conducting stakeholder interviews. So that's over here, these small group interviews, and focus groups. Essentially, these are different sizes of the same idea. So with the interviews and the focus groups, we convene individuals or groups of people at the very beginning of our planning process to help sort of steep us in the existing conditions in Menlo Park. We are expert planners and know a lot about housing policy, but the community of Menlo Park is the experts. You folks are the experts in Menlo Park and what you want to see in your city. And so this is an opportunity for us to really get immersed in a fairly detailed way, in a way that's not possible in a larger community meeting, in the community's vision and constraints and so on. We're also going to be running ongoing social media, print media, and email communications and invitations to engage in the planning process and give us feedback. We're going to be partnering with nonprofit partners to help us with our outreach. That includes, bringing folks on to help us facilitate potentially, or just simply inviting nonprofits to put us in touch with their members or distribute information, etc. We can do pop-up events. These are more like outdoor events where we go to where the community already is. So this could be outside the library if that's a busy place, outside grocery stores, outside the farmers market, where we can set up a booth and a bunch of boards and activities where people can come who might not already be aware of how fascinating an exercise planning is, but we will catch them in part of their day-to-day life and give them an opportunity to give us feedback. And that's a great way to hear from folks who aren't our frequent flyers at this kind of meeting. We're going to be doing a community survey. That's a community-wide online survey. It can be a map-based survey where people can put pins on a map or do a budgeting exercise. Like, we have to put so many housing units around the city. Where do you have to put them all down? Where would those go? And that's something that we are looking forward to talking about with you as we develop those questions. We are thinking about doing a project gallery, which would be an ongoing open house kind of event where it wouldn't be staffed, but we would have a bunch of displays about the project and potentially exercises that people could do at any time. And that could be at the library or other public space. And it's a little bit space dependent. So we're working on thinking about where and how that can happen. It could run through the whole plan process, or maybe it would come up at specific times when it was particularly vital to get input. We are planning on doing a housing seminar. That's, what's going on with the housing element. Go ahead, Member Tronson.
Please let me know if, because you guys know what you're presenting, if you want me and others to hold off, I'll be more than happy to do that. The first question that comes to my mind is that as you're designing the focus groups, can you provide us with information on things like what is the intended outcome of the engagements? Who will design the focus groups and the questions, and how will the questions be analyzed for results to drive action? And how will that input be taken into account? Because as you know, designing a focus group and its questions will have a huge impact on the answers. So if you can inform us today, or if you can let us know when you can inform us on how that process will work, who will design it, that would be of great value and help. Thank you.
Sure thing. So we're going to have a list of the focus groups, the initial list of focus groups that we are planning to reach out to. And we can go into that in a little bit more detail then. And then also when we get into the plan outline, which is the more detailed outline that, that you guys got, then we can go into that even more.
Yeah. And again, I would be very grateful in actually knowing not who we are going to reach out to, like housing organization service providers, but since I'm assuming the results of these focus groups and studies, hopefully maybe drive the decisions, to actually get more information at the right time before it's actually implemented into the design of the focus groups and the questions.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think it's important to note that these focus groups are really for our information and discussion as we are at the very beginning of this process. It's not like a market focus group where we run through different kinds of toothpaste or soda or something like that and then make decisions based on that. It's more, tell us what, tell us what you're focused on, tell us what your vision is. We have some questions for you. They tend to be pretty informal. And so part of it is getting that just baseline familiarity with the community and the issues that folks are working on, and then also building relationships with them so that we can continue to work with folks both more formally in those focus groups and then as part of our ongoing efforts. So we're planning on doing a housing seminar, like a housing 101 kind of thing. What is a housing element? Similar to what we did earlier in this, in the previous meeting. Go ahead.
Christina,
I had a question.
So I'm going to call on folks in order. So I saw Member DeSiena's hand go up first.
Thank you. So I was wondering, I'm seeing that there's a lot of community engagement from just what you were location-wise that you were stating, like grocery stores and farmers market. Are you also thinking of going to the populations that are underserved? For example, like Belhaven.
Yes.
Yeah, and my curiosity is, how can we connect with the families who actually have their children at our schools here, which is the Ravenswood School District, because I know with Menlo Park School District, none of our students from this area go there, unfortunately. But I was wondering, how can we target that population and how can we make it very respectful, especially since our population here in Belhaven is not English speaking, and can we bring people from the community? I'm assuming maybe later on, if you're doing housing seminars, maybe with Mid-Peninsula, that's very well known in our community. So I'm just curious on that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. So part of the sort of big lump of social media, print, et cetera, can be that we will reach out through schools. And actually that is another really fantastic way to reach folks who aren't already interested in planning, because parents are busy and they don't have time to attend a lot of the time all the city council meetings or all the CEOC meetings or all the meetings of whatever group, and so that's a great way to reach out to them, to let them know that the housing element is happening, and to give them a variety of ways to engage and to give feedback. It's also possible to actually directly engage with students and to do virtual presentations to relevant classes, and even put informational packets together for different classes to go through. And we really do welcome your insights also. We have some suggestions on this kind of thing, but Belhaven a lot better than we do, and how to access folks better than we do. And so that's something that we're going to be looking for your feedback on also. Member Michael, I'm sorry, your last name is cut off.
Robledo, is that me?
No, Member
Okay.
Michal. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. I saw Member Robledo's hand go up first. It just wasn't a digital hand. It was a real hand.
Okay.
If you want to go first, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. You can hear me? What I see is you put a lot of work into this, the planners, but at the same time, and you hit a lot of critical points. But it was interesting because I thought that's what we were going to do as a committee, and it's already been done for us. But fortunately, I think you've hit a lot of the main points. So I'm happy with that. I think for me, one of the main reasons I got involved here is because historically there's a challenge in getting participation from Belhaven. And so I feel like many times in this whole process of voting and input and information, we haven't gotten that vote. We haven't gotten that participation. And for me, that is my main focus on why I joined this group. One of the main focuses, because it's in order to have, to me, surveys are more critical going door-to-door canvassing, because historically our community is intimidated and feels like they haven't been heard, so they're less likely to participate in events, because for many factors that I don't want to get into right now. So I think it's real critical that familiar faces that they can relate to, partnering faces. I don't want to bring race into it, but sometimes we have to bring people that they're going to feel comfortable with coming into the community, because so much has taken place in the last 7 years with Belhaven that a lot of people they're not going to listen to me. My vote doesn't count. They don't give a crap about me. So it's building trust again in this participation process that I think is critical in order for it to be successful. And I think that's part of what I really want us, the meat of how are we going to do this where it's successful in getting the input that we need, whether it's in social justice or the social, environmental justice, to surveys, to events that are going to draw the community to participate, because social media is tricky, and who participates in social media. And again, I don't want to deal with socioeconomic factors, but the reality is our parents and our families are working late. A lot of people don't have that leisure and that luxury to participate. So the challenge is, how do we successfully get them involved, where their vote for me is critical when it comes to decisions of where housing is going, because to this date, I still don't see any housing that's affordable over that near Santa Cruz Avenue or over near Willow Oaks or all these different areas. And so I just want us to really focus on what's going to be the most effective form of community engagement and outreach in, specifically for me, the Belhaven community. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Member. So I just want to say I'm getting messages from my co-planners that we should probably hold longer comments and questions till our next phase so that we can actually record it better, because we're hearing you and we're taking notes, but our next exercise is to be writing it down where people, you all and also people in the community can actually see those words getting recorded. So let's try to do that, unless you have a very specific clarifying question. We may ask you to say some of those things again, Member Robledo, just so we can to make sure to capture them.
Sure.
So Member Michal, please go ahead. If you have something really quick, or if you can hold it, then let's do that.
Let me try to go quick. If it's not quick enough, just cut me off. So first question is, are we gonna get input from people who work in this community but can't afford to live here? Is that included in the thinking? And the second question is, I see a lot of thoughtfulness already put in there in terms of all the different ways of getting feedback. I'm wondering about the thinking behind when we get the feedback. It appears to be heavily weighted when there is nothing specific to give feedback on, just a general sense of what do you care about, and relatively limited when there are actual things to react to, whether they're the policy or the actual plan. And I'm okay. Thank you. I was just curious about that.
Great points. Let's write them down in a little minute. And I will ask you to say that again. Just very briefly, we haven't talked that much about how to reach out to folks who work in the community, but we should think about that together as a group. Okay, I swear it's like 5 slides, so I'll be done in just a second. Okay, so the other way that we're planning on reaching out to folks is through videos, so that we can do some presentations and have them up on our website. And those should be accessible at any time. All right, so this is a fairly detailed schedule of our outreach process. You can see that we have our phases here: visioning, developing the plan framework, developing the draft plan, and then doing the environmental work and final plan adoption. You can see the environmental work takes quite a while. And so we're going to be working pretty significantly through 2021 to get these ideas together. And so it is true that there is a lot of upfront outreach up here in visioning and general outreach, etc. We're going to be putting together a project gallery. We're going to be putting together a community survey. We're going to be starting to do pop-up meetings and general outreach. And so just to list a few of the preliminary things that we're going to be doing in our visioning phase, which is where we're gathering information from the city, we're doing our existing conditions work, and we're saying, what is it that you want to see? This is what we're seeing. And so that's something for folks to respond to. These are the statistics that we're seeing. These are the trends that we're seeing. These are the trends that we're seeing not only in the population, but also in the housing market and development trends and so on. How do you think we should begin to respond to that? Those are the kinds of things that we talk about in visioning. And we really don't like to go out to the community without good questions. So the stakeholder interviews and focus groups, we have a sort of nascent idea of what we're working on. Obviously, we've done, a proposal, and we've worked, so, we're gathering information and so on, but that's preliminary meetings. As we go further through this phase, again, there's more to share in terms of existing conditions and so on with folks to respond to. We have our stakeholder interviews and our focus groups. We're going to be partnering with local organizations and doing our housing workshop and our housing intro seminar, beginning the project gallery where we're offering information to the community and asking preliminary visioning questions. And we are going to, at the end of that, be producing a summary presentation, not a report, of what we have heard in terms of visioning and what we heard in all of our outreach efforts. We're also going to do a pop-up workshop, and we should talk about where and how this should happen to make sure that we are getting the most folks. Then in the framework, this is where we have a preliminary idea of where we think that we're going to go with the housing element. And so then we're going to be coming back to the community and saying, hey, this is the vision, and these are the preliminary policies that we are developing. These are the preliminary ideas about where we think housing could go in the city, etc. We're going to have another pop-up workshop around that. And then we do have ongoing city council meetings and check-ins, CEOC meetings, and housing commission meetings at major inflection points of the project. And then once we have a draft plan, we essentially go through another cycle of very similar outreach. We're going to have a pop-up workshop. We're going to let folks know that we're starting the EIR process, the environmental review process, and we're going to have a public meeting on the draft plan review. So this is where folks can really review that deliverable, as well as being welcome at any of these public meetings that are listed above. And we're going to be producing drafts during that time of the housing element, the land use element, the environmental justice element, the safety element, and the zoning ordinance and map edits. And then we're going to move into our final drafts, and we start to need review of this by the Housing and Community development folks at the state. We're going to do another pop-up workshop as we narrow in on that. But it's not all going to be finalized until we have a full environmental impact report and we understand the ramifications of that analysis. We see whether or not we need to shift our draft around, and then ultimately by approximately the end of 2023, we will have a final housing element and EIR, that's environmental impact report, and all of these other elements ready for adoption by City Council. And to summarize that, this is kind of a zoom in of the next chunk of our work, where we have our first meeting here. We're going to be doing individual and group interviews, intro seminar, etc., beginning our project gallery, and throughout you can see the CEOC meetings. We didn't add all of them because this would have turned into the last graphic that you saw, but you can see that there are touch points with the community at each of our major meeting points. And this, okay. And so by the end of that, we're going to be having some land use alternatives for folks to review. When we talk about focus groups, there are some requirements that we have because we are complying with state regulations around fair housing and making sure that we are forwarding and proactively planning for fair housing. And these are some of the groups of folks that we are planning on very intentionally reaching out to. That includes residents, obviously, disadvantaged communities, any kind of description of disadvantaged community groups, housing focused organizations, service providers, renters, and homeowners as different kinds of groups because there are different concerns with each of those groups. Local businesses, this is where we could start to think about local workers, housing developers, religious institutions, and district partners like schools. Member Olivera, do you have, Olivera, do you have, thank you.
I was just wondering, how are you describing disadvantaged communities? Like, has that been elaborated on at all?
So yes, and let's get into that a little bit more because I don't want to record all of, say all of this and then not have it kind of on our record sheet. There are some state definitions of disadvantaged communities, and we can talk about that relative to a bill called Senate Bill 1000 and how we define what a disadvantaged community is. But then we can also talk amongst ourselves about whether or not that is an adequate definition, whether or not we're going to be getting all the folks that we need to be engaged in this process.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Everything that you were putting together previously in terms of outreach, I think part of my concern is what may work in terms of the types of outreach that you've outlined here may not necessarily be as effective in different communities. And so I think what it would be nice to do is review that at some point more, dissect it more in depth, because what works on one community may not work in the other community, and that's why they're excluded. So
yes, so in terms of dissection, and I'm sorry for jumping in, but we do have like literally all of the words of our community outreach outline on this next board where we can dissect as much as we want to. And this is something, again, that we're looking to you to give us feedback on. And it may be that there are tools that we should use, like, making sure that we identify and engage people who happen to be hubs in the community, and really making sure that they can help us to share some information or whatever it is that works best for individual communities. Okay, so what we are looking for from you, and this is a show from last time around, are whether or not you have any questions on the outreach plan, and we're going to launch into all of this right away. So don't feel like you have to give us all this feedback right now. So questions or comments on the outreach plan, ideas for groups to reach out to, and also how we should best reach out to them, and ideas, well, so here it is, for how to reach the community as a whole and or particular groups. So this is what we're planning on looking forward to next. we can continue to work on this outreach outline together. And then we're going to think about what our next steps are also, and maybe Jeff and Sung, who have been working on the agenda for our next meeting, can touch on that. So let's see. Mayor Marshall.
Thank you. I don't want to be negative, but I suppose I am being. I've been through these planning sessions before, not with Menlo Park, but trying to, quote unquote, engage the community. And I represent District 4. We are not a disadvantaged community, but we, the committee, I believe, needs to find ways to engage them as much as we need to engage Belhaven. As someone has said, you need different methods for different groups. But I think bottom line is, if all we do is put together a plan like this, and then we have the meetings or the focus groups and we choose who's going to attend, or, we try to get our people out, et cetera, we're not getting to the basic problem. I think that what people are feeling is not that they've been excluded from being heard as much as the powers that be, in this case, the city council, does not do or take into account in a serious manner what these people are saying they need. So, just the talk so far has been about, are we going to make sure that we include communities that have been excluded before? Well, let's say we do it, we learn how to do that. But if we just listen to them, but nobody does anything that they say they need, we're doing more harm than good. And I don't pretend to say that this is an easy question, but I think it's sort of been ignored. We're just talking about how can we hear the community. The word community is used over and over again. But for instance, in District 4, I can tell you I'm fairly involved in what's going on. And nobody I know even knows there's a housing element, and they don't really care. I mean, you could do all you want to try to get them to come to meetings and all. And of course, there's always a certain group that come to every meeting, et cetera, but you're not really getting to the community. I don't know how to do it, but I think that we shouldn't ignore what maybe I'm not articulating as well as I should, but the point is we need to listen and then do.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask my colleague, Jeff. I am going to be switching over to writing these notes down. And if you see something that I'm writing, I'm listening and typing and so on. And so if I don't get it quite right, tell me now, tell me at the end of the meeting. That's not a big deal. But it's hard for me to type and call on folks and watch the hand and facilitate. So I'm going to call on my colleague, Jeff, to kind of jump in and help to facilitate the conversation and call on folks.
Okay, thanks, Christina. Hi, everyone. It's Jeff Bradley, M Group. I just want to make sure, since we're getting into this kind of detailed whiteboard exercise here, everyone's familiar with how you can drag the bar on your screen to make the picture smaller and the graphic bigger to the left and the right. It's kind of like a squeegee that goes back and forth. And that can be really helpful to make the written material easier to read. And so I'm going to go down. It looks like Vice Chair Oliveria had your hand up. No. Okay.
This is Deanna.
Just a good stretch. Let me see.
Deanna, did you have something to say? And if folks, for me, you pop up if you put your Zoom hand up, but we might not see you. So
yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just want to agree with Member Carroll. I think many communities haven't been heard, but I think affecting the community that I serve, which is Belhaven, it's more of a fear-based, where there is fear if we speak out due to the environment we live in or community we live in, where it's changing drastically, where it's just insane to afford a place here nowadays. Something that I, as a member here in our community, and as someone who worked in the community, I would actually attend the meetings in the community, and I ran groups in East Palo Alto and in Belhaven with the families that I served to then share that information with them. I also invited the families that I served in Belhaven to participate in the community events, and they would actually attend with me. I try to be there as someone who brings in a safe haven to them, and also clarifications of information, because most of the time, a lot of our, I'm so sorry, my toddler is looking for a ball. I do apologize. Artemis, shh, mommy's talking. 1 minute. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes, and I would also really highly recommend bringing in community workers, such as Community Legal Services of East Palo Alto that serves our community, to come in just to clarify questions that maybe would be not very understanding of the community that we serve here. They are a great organization that supports our residents here as renters and homeowners as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Diacena. I'm going to go to Feldman, Member Feldman next, and then Member Tronson, and then whoever else raises their hand. Robledo would be
Great,
next.
thanks. I agree with so much of what has been said, and I think one barrier, at least when I'm starting to think about this, is people don't always understand how much this affects them, and so really having the communication efforts being focused on, how all this planning process really affects the whole community, to make it real for people rather than this abstract plan. And then I'm also thinking that when we're thinking about adding new housing, implicit in that is that people will be living in that housing that don't currently live here. So I don't know, and we'll have to be thinking about the needs of those people, and thinking about what type, who those people will be. That's sort of unknown, but I think that has to be part of our thinking as we craft the outreach process.
Thank you, Member Feldman. It may be a good idea through the chair, if we might ask for a public comment before we get into all of the member comments and questions.
Yes, yes, we can do that. Let me just pull up this agenda here. All right, before we get into our comments and questions, Kal Chan, do we have any public comment?
So prior to taking public comment, I'd just like to remind everyone who is in attendance, if they wish to provide public comment. If you're joining us by computer, please press the raise hand feature on the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us by a landline or cell phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. We'll have the ability to see your virtual raised hand and then be able to call on you to speak. We'll give a couple moments for people to raise their hands if they would like to speak. At this time, we have no public comment. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go back to opening it up to our general discussion. Any phone folks? Jeff?
Thank you, Chair Fennell. I just, point of order, I noticed in the Zoom function that we have an attendee named Tiffany Dow, who is also a member of the committee. Could we?
That's correct.
Hi there, Member Tiffany Dow. You have been promoted to the panelist. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Great.
Hello. Sorry, I wasn't sure how to enter the Zoom.
Sorry about that. You should usually get a link from somebody at the city that will give you a special entry, but here you are, and definitely not too late.
Thanks.
So I think our next member who had a question or comment was Member Robledo.
I don't want to feel like I'm ever monopolizing the meeting because I got so much to say. So you have to be able to give me some signs sometimes. Because anyway, Leslie and Carol and Oliveri, thank you so much we're on the same page, and I appreciate that. I want people to be aware that there has been repeated things that have taken place in Belhaven historically, and one is the visioning process. And a lot of that already laid out what the community wanted. And when Carol was saying that the community is not being heard, and Yadira was also saying something like this, I think we have to really aggressively look at what's going to be the most effective. Because again, and I hope I don't have to say it again, Belhaven hasn't been heard. And so, I mean, we can't keep doing these things over and over and over and over and over. And that's what's happened historically with Belhaven. They're burnt out. So they're lacking participation. And I think, to me, the most effective input is going to be literally door-to-door outreach with people doing the outreach that they will listen to. And then we will get the most effective input.
Excellent, thank you. Chair Fennell?
Yes, I had a comment. Something that I was thinking about as a way to kind of think about people that we want to be thinking about how we provide hours. One of the experiences I had before COVID, I would swim early in the morning. I would swim at Stanford early in the morning at practice at 5:30 in the morning. And I grocery shop at the same, I grocery shop at the same places. I grocery shop at Safeway, Trader Joe's, Willow's Market, and a few other places. And the one, I know a lot of the workers there. I'm sure they know who I am, because we always wave to each other. But some of these individuals, I see them when I'm heading to swim practice. I see them getting off a bus and walking to Safeway. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Why doesn't this person have the ability, or why are they not having their housing right around the corner? I mean, if you're working at Safeway, you should be able to live right down the street from Safeway and be able to walk to work. You shouldn't be busing over. So one of the things I think is very important for us to think about is those individuals that are working all these jobs in our community, that are spending money to come here to work, when it's like they should be able to live comfortably, pay for rent here, and be able to have an easy commute to work just like everyone else.
Yeah, that's really a good reminder of what this is all about. Being able to provide housing for everyone that the community relies on to support them. We haven't heard from Vice Chair Oliveri yet. And then after that, we'll go to Member McMahon.
So my comment is, my fear is we'll have all this hype, so to speak, and still don't deliver the housing that's appropriate. So my fear is like doing all this work, getting all the community engaged, but we don't actually achieve the goal. I just want to know, like, how serious is Menlo Park about, creating, inclusive housing?
Distributed.
That's a good comment, and I'll try to limit my editorializing and opinionating. But the cities I've worked with over the past 20 years on about 20 of these projects with the housing elements, what I've seen so far from the city council and the city administration is they're the most serious I've seen of any of the cities I've worked with in the Bay Area of addressing these issues around equity and fairness and having a truly balanced community. And that's why we're doing this one and not the 12 or 20 that we've declined, so we could focus on what's happening right here. So thank you for pointing that out. And then we said we were going to go to Member McMahon. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
You guys are always moving around. Okay. There you are.
Right. Hey, first of all, I just want to say, man, the comments are great. I was really hoping to learn about my community, and in 2 meetings, it's just way exceeding my expectations. It's really good, really good. My concerns are the 2 things that I think of based on the presentation I saw you guys give in the previous presentation, is that what you're talking about doing is building a series of tests to gather data. And there's 2 components to that. One is the test. And of course, the first one is sampling. And we're hearing a lot about how do we get a good representative sample that is correctly weighted with the various subpopulations that we have. And so I'm not saying it as well as I've heard other people say it in this meeting, but I'm really curious what method and what approaches M Group is going to suggest to make sure that we get just the perfect, or the best sample that we can get. You can never get the perfect sample in the various groups that exist within our community. And then the second part I have questions about is, the data collection. So it's different methods and different mechanisms for gathering data, whether that's door to door, whether that's a community group or an online survey or whatever. My concern is there going to be a common component in every single one of those data collection systems so that we can ask the same questions of the same people so that we can compare the various groups. So I'm really, really interested in that sort of reliability of the sample across the various groups we talk about. And I'm also really interested in the validity of the actual questions and topics that are placed as well. And not just the validity, but having other sorts of questions, other sorts of discussions that we can then look at. How do those relate to the top level criteria questions and data that we want to sort of gather? So it's a bit, to use the terminology of 30 years ago, it's a bit psychometric what I'm describing here. But the point is, I'm really curious with all these different methods. They're going to elicit different kinds of information. Information elicited in one mechanism may not be relatable to another one. And so I'm wondering, how are we going to ensure that we have common questions and common ways of relating the answers off of the different groups through the different mechanisms of asking those questions? It's complicated. I know it's really complicated, and that's why you guys are here. But otherwise, a lot of work could go into this. We could do a great job of sampling, but then we just have a lot of data in the end, and it's not clear how to construct a narrative that then informs our government to come up with the best plan that serves every group's needs. So that's my comment.
So should we be responding? I would love for this to be a conversation. Jeff editorialized, so I might jump in too, unless I get a ping from somebody to tell me to wait until it's my turn. Okay, so yes, those are great questions. And I do want to say that like planning is part art and part science. Our cities are both quantifiable and sort of unknown magic. And so I'm not going to say that all of the feedback that we get is going to be something that we can compare across every meeting. So there is going to be some reliance on us as a team to get this kind of feedback and to synthesize it and to, and to deliver that feedback. Using tools like this, it helps to make it easier to really, to make sure in the moment that we're capturing the points that that folks want to make sure that there's something that we can then show to other people or bring forward, but there is a certain amount of interpretation that happens. There are also a bunch of tools that we can use. We can use real-time polling in any kind of meeting so that we are, as long as folks have a phone or access to some kind of device, they can all be answering the same question. We can do that across a bunch of different kinds of meetings. And that then ends up being pie charts and data that we can share and that we can agglomerate across all of our different meetings. We can also do surveys, which obviously are much more quantitative or can be. So we essentially, we use all the different tools at our disposal, both our cognitive and creative selves that can assimilate and make something of this information, and also data gathering tools like surveys and polling. We can also do things like we can have an in-person event where we're using a particular polling question, and then we can do an asynchronous event that people can do at any time like a virtual community workshop where we have them going through the same information and the same questions, so that we can try to gather that information. And then we make sure that we bring all of that to council or to the relevant decision-making body, so that, you know, not only are we interpreting the raw data and so on, but we're also making, you know, making that data itself accessible.
Yeah. So the reason I bring this up is 30 years ago, I did a summer internship where I had to fix data collection, or huge amounts of data was collected in a medical setting, but people didn't know what to do with it. And so and some of it came from simple interviews, other came from questionnaires, other was hard data as well. But the problem is, if there isn't sort of this consistency of approach across different methods and mechanisms, reliability measures and validity measures, people asking the same questions when they go door to door that are asked in other formats, you know, then your knowledge and your ability to act on it just gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And that's one of my big concerns here, because there's a lot of information that I'm hearing that people know exists out there. I just want to make sure that we get the best, largest sample that's usable.
Thank you, Member McMahon. It's been brought to my attention by city staff that I should hand the reins over to calling on people and managing the meeting to our very capable Chair Fennell.
I'll take.
And Chair Fennell, if I may just also jump in, this is Deanna. So I do see a member of the public.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
And then how do they comment? Is that Cal takes care of that?
Yes.
Okay. Cal,
Would you
I
like to
believe.
open up public comment again?
Yeah. Can we open up public comment? I believe
Yes.
Karen Grove would like to speak.
Yes, Karen Grove, you have the ability to turn on your mic and provide public comment at this time.
Thank you. So I'm Karen Grove, and I am a member of the Housing Commission, but I'm commenting only as myself, not representing the Housing Commission. I read the proposed outreach plan and really appreciate it, and I really appreciate everything that you all are contributing. And I've been in and out, so if this has already been said, I apologize. But I have two things to say. One is, when we do engage community members and community organizations to assist with outreach, can we compensate them with a stipend? And second, I think especially for the organizations who are under so much stress right now with the pandemic and the eviction moratorium that's going to end in 2 weeks, they're under so much stress. So I think we're going to have to compensate. There's no partnership without compensation. And then the second point is about the project gallery. From reading the proposal, I sort of imagined it landing at the downtown library, but because, you know, conference room, this, not the other thing. However, I think it should go where we have the greatest concentration of people who don't have internet access, since that's who it's meant for. And so I would just encourage us to be creative about how to do that. And I looked up mobile art galleries and would love to be able to share that image, but they're basically big trucks that are open, and you can put a gallery in it, so that could go anywhere. And I would love to hear from the District 1 members of the committee, or, you know, you all will. Anyway, that's my comment. I'm not the expert, but I imagine that Ivy Plaza or somewhere over in Belhaven would be a great place to put that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll go back to our member discussion. I'm not sure. I believe it was Member Tronson. You were next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will go back to my initial comment, which is also consistent with what Dan mentioned and others, is that, okay, so let's assume that we reach out the communities we want to reach. Let's assume we ask them the questions, invite them to in whichever forum. What remains still, and I'm very concerned because the schedule says public final comments are June 10th, which is like 7 days away. My biggest concern is what are the questions? I have not seen the questions yet to even say I'm okay with even the outreach plan, because the questions will determine the outcome. You've got the sample size. Let's say we take care of it. You've got the outreach of getting people in. Let's say we take care of that. Polls, surveys, they're all means. They're not the actual questions. The data has to drive action. Without some strategy to drive action from the data we get, it's meaningless. So I really like to see what are those questions that we plan to ask. Education is one thing. Education is open-ended. We go and talk about, let's say, what is a housing element and everything else. But what are we going to ask people, and how are those answers going to drive our action? The other thing that I don't see, or again, I don't see it, not that it's not there, is that I'm looking at the calendar that goes this way, right? And the one before that, both of them. I don't actually, if this is meant to portray the process, I don't see any input from the engagement to the decision-making, right? So I see things going linearly this way and things going linearly that way, but there is no indication of how these community engagement responses will impact the outcome. And without that, I don't know what is set in stone and what is flexible. So those are, otherwise, before we know it, things will have a life of their own and decisions will be made without any effective input into the outcome. That is my biggest concern right now. And I will defer to the experts to tell us how you plan to address that.
Thank you, Member Johnson. I'm going to move on to Member DeSiena.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Facebook, how can we partner with Facebook? When our community was not attending the clinics for the vaccine, Facebook actually took drive into getting more people from the community by moving the location to one of their buildings, and the numbers of people who attended was amazing. How can we partner with Facebook since they're doing a lot in our community?
Thank you, Member DeSiena. I believe Member Bortnick also has a comment.
Yes, thank you. So I specifically want to speak about the concern that was already brought up with getting input, but not making anybody feel heard. And as I understand, and I don't feel like I understand it very well, but as I understand, like the setup here is gonna lead to that. And specifically, I think asking questions about just what you want in general, without making it clear what is it that we're gonna need the input on or how we're gonna use the input, could lead to a lot of answers that are gonna be ignored because they're not gonna be part of what's up to decide. So in my personal experience, when I was trying to learn about what a housing element was, it took me many questions and a lot of time before I get to the point like, oh, I get it. We're primarily deciding about where the zoning is gonna go and like in which locations we're gonna put things. And that's actually really important for equity. But it took me a long time to realize that, you know, we're not deciding whether or not cities should build the housing. We're not deciding how many things should be built. That's those things are already set. And if we just have open-ended input, like, hey, tell me what you want here, then we're gonna get a bunch of input that's just not gonna be part of any decision. And so I keep trying to figure in my head, like, how can we prevent all this work, all this good work, and all this effort from the community from being ignored? And, you know, maybe the solution is to like be clear about which decisions we're about to make here. Maybe is to shift the input when there is something concrete to react to. I don't know what the solution is, but my fear here is we're doing exactly the thing we don't want to do, which is get lots of input and then ignore it.
Thank you, Member Bortnick. I believe Member Klein has a comment.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And sorry I'm on audio, but I just wanted to bring up a couple of items because each process is unique. And since I've been on 2 past projects, these housing elements, I'm loath to say this is what we did before because everything's unique. and people have changed, and you know, the world is different. And so I do think the comments that were really important to emphasize are the community uniqueness on how they engage and how they process information, and that's so important. But it also puts a responsibility, and I wanted to see from the consultants if there's going to be a way they're going to be able to demonstrate the background to be able to elicit those responses. And this a little bit goes into just the former just the past comments. Enough education so that it doesn't get the eyes glossy, but it gives context. In this community, here are the city-owned properties. Here are private properties. Here is where impactful housing can happen. Here's where you would have to rezone entirely, right? There'd be laws that have to be created. Some way to briefly have that conversation, because the context, it's important. And it's important because it goes to the next step, which is our engagement of the actual owners. You know, I think some of the failing is that I think there's a lot of like-minded approaches to affordable housing in this community, frankly. And I don't think there is a lot of people who stand up and say, I've been working, you know, on this forever, and I don't believe we should have this spread out amongst the city. I think what happens is the people who own properties don't care. Half of them are trusts, right? And opportunity sites are just left to the devices of the owner. So if you have like apartments on Robles, there's so many different owners of those. They don't even pay attention to the housing element, have no idea we just upzoned the entire neighborhood. Maybe we didn't do it enough. This type of feedback, I think, is what really was the kind of Achilles heel on any process I can remember. Is we just didn't have the actual property owners who could make that change. Like SRI, you know, we met with them with Facebook to say, how can we, you know, do some share to get the property that you're not using? And something's happening now, but you know, that housing element, that was 7 years ago now. So it's like, that's how long it takes. I'm worried that if we don't engage property owners right up front and really get an idea of what can be done, we're just going to go down the path of having false hope again on sites, because opportunity sites, there are many around Central and West Menlo if we're able to get to those property owners. So I was going to ask about that.
Thank you, Member Klein.
Thank you.
Member Feldman, did you?
Yes, thanks. I kept changing my mind, but I think I just want to make a brief question. So we have this committee, and I know there's also the housing committee, but I'm not clear on what if any interaction there will be between this committee and that committee, or if we'll be making a presentation to them based on the findings, or what. Yeah, I would like to know more about that and how what we do it impacts what that committee does.
Thank you, Member Feldman. Member Robledo, did you?
Yes. I'm loving all these comments, and they're really great. And Rich, you touched on some things as well. However, I want to sort of touch on what Karen said, Karen Grove, is when we look at strategic planning for outreach, there's something she mentioned in terms of compensation. I recently volunteered like 6 months doing the COVID testing here in Belhaven. I had no idea that there was going to be compensation, and there was. I was doing it because I wanted to do it on a volunteer, but there was compensation. And I think sometimes as we look at outreach, I'm looking at something that could be really positive, which is a stipend of some sort, a compensation that we get people from the community to get engaged. But not only as they are getting engaged, they are getting informed, and they are becoming more aware of issues, and hopefully now becoming more of a bit of an activist in their own community, because now we've lured them in for however we do that. And now we can keep them. I know I've been to many meetings with Facebook, and yes, Facebook is a great resource, but my point is that I think sometimes it's like AmeriCorps. That was supposed to be a completely volunteer situation with AmeriCorps. Now the students, one-year program, $1,500 stipend. But my biggest concern that I want us to always focus on, that was in the analysis, is the consistency of segregated, separated living environments. And I think if we really don't look at where placement is going to be, we're going to continue to have those types of environments where it is, how is it stated, segregated living patterns. And west of 101, there's a lot of property that needs to be tapped into. We're tapped out here in Belhaven. We're completely tapped out. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Robledo. Is there any other comments? Member Tronson.
I'd like to actually follow on with what Rich had mentioned about the properties, right? So, and I will request it again from the city, is that it would be really beneficial for us to understand the city-owned properties. There's over 40 of them. What are their plans for them? What have they been spoken for? What are the plans and how can they be used? I don't know if I'm using the right term or not, but when we report to the state, we talk about surplus property. I know that we have not declared anything surplus, but I still do not understand what is the process for deciding if some city-owned property is surplus or not. I just saw the conclusory statement that we haven't declared any. So we can lead by example. The city itself, through its own properties, can lead by example and start designate them for the housing that we are talking about. So I will renew my request that we get some sort of report from the city on those properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Tronson. Does anyone else have any comments? All right, then we will move on. Let me look at our agenda. Okay. Are there any reports from advisory body members since the last CEOC meeting? And I believe that's it for this meeting. I believe our next meeting is June 10th. Is Deanna still on the?
I am. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Yes, so just a couple of quick announcements. So thank you everyone for having the special meeting this evening. So we will resume our next regular meeting on the 10th at 6 o'clock. Also, the City Council is anticipated to make the 2 additional appointments to the CEOC on the meeting at the 8th. So that would be 2 additional members from District 5. So at the next meeting, we hope to have a full membership of 14 members. So unless there's any other comments, I think we're.
One more question.
I have a question.
A few more.
Sure. Okay. Or did you want to say something before questions or?
Yeah, we actually didn't get very far into the draft community engagement plan. I think we're on the table of contents. I know this meeting was scheduled for just an hour, but through the chair, if there's any, since we're all here together, prepared to have this conversation, if the group is willing to go a little longer, we could get into some more of those details that everyone is interested in.
Do we want to go with raised hands first or talk about that? Would you guys, what are folks' thoughts? Member
I'm game to
Carroll,
go maybe till 6:30.
it's 7.
No,
Cool.
today's meeting. Are you talking about another hour?
Yeah, I think he's talking about right now.
Doing another hour?
Maybe take it till 8.
Oh, heck no. I was going to go till 6:30.
It's
7:15 right now.
it's
Oh, it's 7:15. I'm sorry. 7:30. Sorry.
Member, give me a second. I can't. Sorry, Rich, what was that? All right, I'm gonna go to Member Tronson.
Chair Fennell, it was just mentioned that if the committee members had a report, would you consider at what point to maybe form some subcommittees so we can, dive into some of these things in more detail in various groups, and then be able to come back with a report or suggestions or direction, so that we can. So it's not always just. So this is our second meeting. So if you seem appropriate to, have those subcommittees to work on various aspects. There's something to consider for.
Got it. Member Dow.
Hi, I wanted to ask for all the comments and questions that we just whiteboarded. How is that going to be incorporated or move forward in the outline? And you may have said this before, and that was just right at the time that I joined. Does anyone know?
That would be Jeff from.
I'm gonna hand the football to Christina.
Hi, yes. So I don't know if you guys noticed, I'm just going to very briefly share my screen again. But like Jeff said, we got to the table of contents, but we actually have, like all of the pages of the outline, and it looks like it sort of malfunctioned and just thought we wanted to look at the table of contents. But we actually have all of the pages of the plan, and we were planning on going through it and like literally getting your suggestions and edits that we would then incorporate into the plan. That would be the community outreach and engagement outline plan. There are also a bunch of other questions that came up, like, what are the plans for city property and how does this group work with the housing committee, that we didn't answer directly. And, we're still figuring out how best to work this group. So, we could send out answers to those. And I want to collaborate with city staff to make sure that we're doing this in a way that everybody feels good about. But we can either answer those in the next meeting or send out responses if we don't get to them in this meeting, because I don't want there to be floating questions like folks said. You use your voice to ask a question and then there's like silence. That's not great. So we'll work on the best way to answer all that. Great. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And also very excited to be working with all of you. Came a little bit late, so appreciate it.
Thank you, Member Dow. I believe Member Marshall was next.
I was going to address a question which was just answered by Chris, and that is that a number of comments were made tonight in the form of questions for information, and then the chair just says, "Thank you very much for your comments," and then the next person speaks, but there was no there was no answer to these questions. So I suppose what Chris is saying is that she plans to take these questions and write answers to them. And yes, I second Sudi's suggestion for subcommittees. I think, we can read the plan. And of course, if we have any questions, we can ask the questions. But I think rather than spending time reviewing what's written down there, it would be more helpful to us and more productive to our mission if we could stick on one subject and talk it over for a while and maybe come up with some ideas or suggestions. And so I think the subcommittee route might be a good way to accommodate that. Because we're not doing it here. I mean, we listen to the report, which we've already read. Hopefully everyone's done their homework. And then we ask a question, and then there's, as Chris says, silence. So it's hard to have a dialogue or a conversation when things work that way.
So real quick before I move on to Member Feldman, did we want to decide if we were going to go a little bit longer and hear what Jeff was going to share with us? Anyone? Are we saying longer or?
Well, that was sort of my comment was
Okay.
if you want feedback on the detailed report, is there a way we could provide that in writing rather than orally in this meeting, or is this the only forum where we can provide that feedback?
So thank you, Chair Fennell, if I may address that. I would say that as this advisory body, we should have an open and public meeting so that the comments should be provided in this forum. So I would want to limit the amount of communication that occurs. You know, it would generally be a one-way communication to avoid any Brown Act violation if communications are being sent across committee members. So this is, I think, the right forum for us to have the conversation so folks can get reactions and feedback from other committee members on the same topic at the same time. And I would say that this is an intense process, you know, that we have about 18 months and a lot to accomplish. And so we're thankful for this group. So I guess how best to sort of get the feedback that we need, because as you saw in the outline that was presented by Christina, there are a number of things that are happening in the coming weeks and months, all leading into crafting the draft policy documents, the draft plans that are going to be presented to the various commissions. And so I want to make sure that we make use of the committee's time here so that we can start the outreach process. So it is going to be somewhat quick and somewhat iterative too. So there may be an event that we have, and then we'll hear feedback of like, did that work? Did that not work? You know, but we're constantly planning the next week in order to be able to do the marketing and to be able to give people time to plan to attend these meetings. We do need to start preparing and identifying specific dates. I think one of the questions that was raised by the presentation this evening was, you know, who should we reach out to? That's one of our first items, is doing our stakeholder groups, our focus groups. And so we have identified particular sort of categories, but it's who participates also is very important. So having that feedback from this group of, you know, organizations that you work closely with, who in the community are trusted you to provide information as part of this information gathering, is part of what we would like to hear back from this group this evening. So maybe if we do have a few minutes more from this committee, I think if we can focus on that first outreach effort and getting ideas about, you know, are the groups correct? You know, are these the right different organizations? Are these the right sort of categories that we should be conducting our focus groups with? And then the second part to that would be who should we be reaching out to, inviting to participate in those more intimate conversations to get more details. Thank you.
Thanks. Vice Chair Larvia.
I think one of the issues is that I hear from people in the communities that there's a lack of transparency and a lack of marketing things that are going on. And even personally, I find out about events and whatnot by accident. You know, I never feel like I know anything that's going on. And I think we need to improve on that, because even this committee, there's a lot of people that probably would have applied, but they had no clue it was even happening. You know, I kind of found out in a happenstance type of way. So I think how we communicate and how we disseminate information needs to be improved. And the other thing is, are we sure there's not a way that we could talk via email or a group chat? Because this is a huge undertaking. It is intense. I agree with you. And it seems like we're not going to really have enough space or time to really thoughtfully work this process out.
Thank you, Vice Chair Alarvia. If I can also throw in there, because if we're trying to focus on reaching out to folks and with what you just said, so then what is our suggestion of how to do that? I think it's very blanket for us to just to say social media, sponsored posts. But if we're really thinking about reaching the person that's working right now in Bellhaven or the person that's reaching in District 3 that lives in my apartment complex, how do you reach that person that, just moved here 3 months ago? How do we suggest that we reach that person? And I think that us thinking about how we can reach those people is what's going to be beneficial for us to focus on currently, which is the how to do that, and what is the action behind that. What is that concrete action? Like, instead of just saying, okay, go Menlo Park, go make a social media post and put it on all your social media platforms and send it out there. Like, how do we do something and then we guarantee that people are going to actually want to engage? Because I mean, how do we get this with what we're doing out here? Because we only have 6 attendees, right? And we should have more people attending this meeting so that they can have, like, that's an actionable item that we can have right now, is figure out how do we as committee members go to our neighbors and invite them to the next meeting, right? So that's something that's an actionable item that we can do right now. Is maybe make it a goal, talk to 5 people, see if we can boost our attendee numbers up so that we can get people from the outside as well, knowing what's going on here and knowing that there's an opportunity. Because I'm also going to say that, with certain things ending with what's going on, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love to give us their input of, hey, how can we help them with the housing situation here? So I will go to Member Tronson.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I seriously, I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, but sometimes you have to keep repeating the same thing. I personally think, given the fast schedule that is happening and the fact that you already have, not that you did the wrong thing, but since the schedule is pretty preset, this is when the final comments are in, this is when this is in. I really don't see a time and opportunity for make a change, in the fact that if already all the decisions have been made and no input is required, then why bother? If you want to actually engage in that, it's kind of like going to class. You don't go to class to read through everything online, every student together. We need to have at least study groups to take each portion and study it and come back and report, just like, somebody mentioned, I think Jeff, you mentioned that earlier, if there's any reports. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And I love the fact that we're going to outreach, and I'm sure M Group, given your expertise in this, you already have the questions. You already know how you're going to create that dialogue. Those are the things we like to see as members of this body. So, to the extent that we know our neighbors, we can say, oh, this is, maybe add this other question, or that ask it a different way. I personally like to see that. I don't eat meat, I'm a vegetarian, but the meat and potato of the process, not just highlight levels. I think we don't have time to just look at highlights, and then by the time we get to it, it's too late. Decision has already been made, which is typical of the city. We engage, but we just talk, and then our input doesn't get into the conversation. I mean, the residents' input doesn't get into the decision. I really would encourage us to consider doing subcommittees, so by next time or the time after, we actually, each of us comes back and provides at least our understanding of what each section is about, and get some more details from the M Group. Thank you, Chair.
Let me go to Member Dow first, and then I'll go to you, Member Marshall.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Member Tronson and also you, Chair Fennell. In terms of being able to get more people to participate or just be interested in providing the feedback, something that I'm thinking about is a lot of the questions that were talked about earlier was just not knowing the extent to which our input is going to have an impact. And if we had some clear expectation, or we could share that expectation with the people that we're talking to and say, hey, you know, this is like, this input will be taken and be used for X, Y, and Z thing, and kind of clearly setting the expectation and showing like what the benefit is. I think that can be really helpful as we share, whether it's social media, next door, et cetera. Because short of that, people are, you know, to Member Johnson's point, people are like, why would I spend my time when I have so many things to do if this is not going to benefit, if no one's going to listen? So I don't know if there is some kind of communication or messaging that we can share about the extent to which the input will be incorporated or listened to, or just give some sense of how it'll be translated. That might be helpful for us when we go out and reach out to 5 people or whatnot, to get them to come participate, or yeah, that's one part I'm thinking about. And then the other part, to Vice Chair Olarvia, is, yeah, learning about this committee was very happenstance. Like I happened to look at the mailer that came through, and other than that, I could just skate through all of Menlo Park without ever coming across anything City of Menlo Park related. So I am also thinking about, as a person who maybe wasn't previously that engaged because I didn't know how to engage. This is a really great opportunity to figure out how to engage people by messaging what the potential benefit could be.
Thank you, Member
I may
Dow.
break the Brown Act at this point. Chair, may I interrupt for a second?
Sure, and then we'll go to Member Marshall.
So I feel like this is a new committee, and I am an outreach person. I'm less good at Brown Act meetings. Deanna, you can tell me to be quiet if I'm breaking the Brown Act. But I just feel like it would be really helpful for us to be clear with the committee, like Member Tronson was saying, hey, you know, what about subcommittees? So what is our process for making decisions? You know, what, and Deanna, maybe you can pop on and make a recommendation. You know, would you want the chair to say, you know, do we have a motion around that? Or, you know, how do we make a decision so that these suggestions don't just kind of float out and feel unresponded to?
Yep.
Go to Member Marshall.
Mr. Chair, with respect, I think you have heard your committee, many of the members of the committee sort of say the same thing, and not sort of, have said the same thing in different ways. Sudi and Tiffany have said the same thing. And that is, yes, of course, we want to find out how we can reach the most people. But really, what we are not discussing here tonight is, what is our message when we get them together? How can we let them know that their views not only will be listened to, in quotes, listen, but will somehow make a difference in the decision-making process. And I mean, maybe the other committee members know something I don't know, but I can't figure out how we as a committee are even making decisions, much less how we are going to try to convince the people who are trying to get to come to these various outreach things that their views will really be taken seriously. I think that's what your committee's saying to you in many different ways. And I'd like somebody to address it. Maybe the answer is, well, it's none of our business. This committee can't talk about those things. All that we're here to do is to see that we get 50 people to a meeting. I don't know.
Well,
we want to do more, and we're not understanding how we can do that. I don't want to speak for all the committee members, but that's the way I've been hearing what they're saying.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of people say the same thing. I believe we got, I'm just taking a look at my email. I thought we had an email that was kind of spelling out why certain city council members wanted to get our input. And I'm trying to see if we can find it, because I think that's correct. What is our messaging? So if we were to go to our neighbor, what would you say? to them right now. And I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know what to say. They'd be like, hey, I'm doing this housing committee and you should come join it. And then what is the end, right? How is their input going to be valuable, and how can they guarantee that they are actually going to be listened to?
Okay, you got the question right. Now we have to figure out how we're going to find out the answer, so the committee understands what our mission really is.
Sure. Now this is
not being very abrupt, but that's just the way I see it.
Chair Fennell respond to Member Mayor Marshall's comment, and I think Christina's comment earlier related to subcommittee groups. So the committee here can form ad hoc subcommittees. That is something that can be done. Before we do that, I would suggest that there needs to be a purpose and a mission identified for that particular group, not creating a subcommittee for the sake of having a subcommittee, but what is it that they're specifically charged to look at, and then bring back as part of a larger discussion. So we can certainly explore that if there are things that I think might be better handled through a smaller group, and then come back with a recommendation to the larger CEOC. And then to Mayor Marshall's question about the purpose of the CEOC, and so the broader purpose is for community and engagement. So it's really, getting your expertise on how do we make those connections with members in the community. What is the best social media? Maybe social media is not even something that is used anymore. What are the techniques to make sure that we are reaching out? Maybe the mailers aren't effective. Maybe it is door to door. Is it a certain particular app that people use, that we can explore. So these are the things that we want to hear, and it may be different types of activities or events for different areas, or for even different types of feedback that we want to receive depending upon the particular aspect of the project, right? So if we're looking at sites, we talked about we know that we have about 3,000 housing units. That's not something that can be changed through this process, but where we put those housing units is something that we have control over, right? And so doing a mapping exercise may be the most effective way of doing it. If I'm telling people oh, remember that parcel that's over on the corner of such and such, people may not know that, but if you have a map, that's going to be the more effective way for people to become engaged in the process. So really the focus of this group is to do outreach, or to help us figure out the best way to engage and conduct outreach, and then attending those meetings. So you can say, hey, we're having a couple of pop-up events, or we're having a survey, and with each of those items, we're going to be having conversations with you about does the survey look good? And then you'll know a little bit more about those activities and events that you can share with your residents in the city, your neighbors, your colleagues. So I guess it'll be sort of an ongoing process. So that with the mission of outreach, but we're going to be able to identify those activities, along the way that Christina identified as part of our broader engagement plan and during the presentation.
Deanna, can you just clarify the housing aspect then as well? Because I think we got the outreach. What about, because if we go and say, hey, you should attend this meeting, why should someone that's renting come attend our meetings?
Can I speak to that, Chair Fennell? Thank you. To me, the elevator pitch to go out and get your friends and neighbors interested and maybe a little excited about this planning process is really a chance to influence the way the city plans for housing over the next 8 years. So, and it has been said numerous times, the absolute number of housing units is set by the state, and the city doesn't have much control over that, but the city has absolute control, not absolutely, but has a broad degree of flexibility of what form that housing takes. If the community engagement comes back and says, you know what, the thing that's really missing here is senior housing. We just don't have nearly enough senior housing. That can become a big focus of the community plan. If the feedback comes back that, well, yeah, we have seniors, but they want to age in place. They want to stay in their house, but they need help. You can have programs and policies that facilitate that, who can, set up roommates, who can provide funding for maintenance, possibly through CDBG grants, community development block grants. Young people just starting out saying, hey, I just need a small studio I can rent for less than $2,000 a month. That's a big need in my community, my neighborhood. The plan can focus on details like that and can really provide opportunities for people who want to live in the community, including those people that don't live in the community currently, that several people have mentioned tonight. That is actually a core purpose of this whole exercise, is to make the community a place that people can live there who don't currently live there. These are the future residents that might be coming from somewhere else. And for a lot of people, the idea of providing more housing in a way that's socially and racially equitable can be a real motivating force. And that is something that the city's going to pursue, but there's going to need to be a strong amount of community support to really make it happen in a way that best serves the community. And so I don't want the message to be that, oh, everything's regulated, the city's going to do what they're going to do, because there are so many ways to influence the process and so many different ways to do a plan that serves the unique needs of both the existing residents and people who desire to live in the community, who currently may live and do very essential jobs to support the community, but can't even come close to afford to living there. So I think there's lots of avenues for people to come into it, and I think the plan will be a direct reflection of those inputs.
Thank you. Before I go to Member Johnson, Member Alarvia, Cal, I believe we have a public comment.
Yes, we do have one public comment. Would you like to take that at this time, Chair Fennell?
Yes, please.
Okay. Lynn Bramlett, you have the opportunity to provide your public comment at this time. Lynn, would you mind speaking into your microphone or moving your headset a little closer?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I apologize. I have two computers and one has a bigger screen, so I was at that one. So I'm Lynn Bramlett. I live in District 3 in a single family home, but right next to a lot of apartment buildings. And my husband and I just love the mixed, community. We think it's great. And I don't at all remember the last housing element. I was changing jobs and it kind of was a blur. But I have heard that some people think there's resistance to changing the zoning, and that could very well be. So what hasn't been explicitly brought up here, but I think would be something to consider, would be materials aimed at helping to lower that resistance. And I once saw a wonderful document put out by the state of Connecticut, and I'll try to find it. I saved it. That was very much aimed at why affordable housing should be all over a city, why a community is better, a lot of the reasons. So I think some updated form of that would be really helpful, to these committee members, which I appreciate your work here tonight, and just in the community. So I would think of it as kind of air cover for your work, your air, sea, and land campaign, if you will. And thank you again very much. Really appreciated the discussion tonight.
Thank you, Lynn. I believe Member Tronson was next.
Sorry, I'll make you all remember my voice. So I kind of disagree, Deanna, with something you said. And then Chair Fennell, you brought it up, and Jeff, you followed up on that. I asked early on, we like to understand, or at least I do like to understand, what is movable and what is negotiable, right? And Jeff, right now, based on your comments, Chair, you mentioned, Jeff, that, for example, the total number of units are fixed by state, which I don't necessarily think that's a minimum. The max city can do better. I don't think the state restricts us to do better. But for example, zoning might be negotiable, or some other location may be negotiable. So that is what we need. We're not, if you were just trying to sell some vague thing that we still, I don't have a clue what it is, then marketing people are better at it than, let's say, typical resident who may not be a marketing expert as to what form of outreach might be best. We are trying to do that because we live in our communities. So that's why you're counting on us. But before I can digest what it is that I'm selling, not selling as a car salesman, but selling, it's very difficult to explain that to my neighbor, to anybody else who participate. And I like to take Jeff up on what you were saying in that, give us that template, give us those things that are set in stone and cannot be changed, and things that can be changed based on community input. And that is how we can, first of all, we know what the value then is that we can bring. And also the members that we want to invite, they understand how their input could potentially be heard. And again, we have to make sure those feedback are timed so that there is an opportunity to make a change. If you just get input without the opportunity because it's too late in the process to make a change, then it has no value. It just makes people pissed off even more. So we need to really look at the timeline, what the questions are, when they're asked, and how are they going to get reviewed? What is the criteria for inclusion into the next revision of a plan? I mean, that's just like any project management, any kind of design of experiment, anything you want to do, focus groups, whatever. We need to understand that. And I'm being too dense right now, and I don't get it. So that's just an honest feedback from my perspective. But I like what Jeff said. If you can elaborate on that and give us that toolbox, that would be wonderful for us to kind of convince people why they should participate.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Vice Chair Alaria.
So I'm a little confused on, like, it would be kind of helpful if the elevator pitch was maybe even a document. So let's say someone is interested in purchasing a home. Like, how are we helping people, afford to purchase homes? Like, how do I sell that this is a part of that? Like, I'm talking like the middle lane, the forgotten middle class in a sense, or I guess there is no middle class, but if there was a middle class, like, how do we say you can purchase a home in Menlo Park?
Thank you, Member Laria. So I think we still are all kind of on the same page of trying to figure out what is the message, what is it that we're selling in. While I keep hearing everyone, I as well as just think about, all right, so if I was to try and get 5 people to attend the next meeting, how would I do that? And it's just going to come back to why, right? Why is my neighbor, going to want to jump on a phone call at 6? And it's really, you're kind of going to have to first kind of, connect with your neighbor and kind of see what, if they have any concerns about housing, and then kind of get in discussion about that, and then kind of say, hey, there's an opportunity for you to influence what housing is going to look like for the next 8 years. And I think once people get it here that they have an opportunity to influence, even though some of us have hesitations that we're not sure if us meeting together is really going to see that much of a difference. I think that if we can trust this process, but also figure out a way to get other people to trust this process and really see how they can influence, as well as just that opportunity of just showing, providing solutions to the city of, here are better ways to reach people, right? The easiest way for me dealing with marketing and knowing marketing is, yes, social media, we can make it happen right now. But I want to think about what are the ways that we can guarantee that we have 10, 15 people on this call next time, and feeling as though that they have a stake in this, because I know people want to have their voices heard. But I think some of this is just going to honestly just be groundwork. It's just going to, right now, it's going to kind of be up to us to reach out to those individuals. Social media is the easiest thing, right? Menlo Park can just post something on their Instagram and do a sponsored post, but that is not the same as talking to your neighbor, or all of us talking to our neighbor and having that discussion around housing and outreach and what is the future of what you want your city to look like, so that they can come and then share that as a whole, so that we can then send it on to city council. So I think that's something we kind of have to reflect on, is like, what is our elevator pitch that just kind of goes through these certain points that kind of brings someone through a funnel that ultimately is just like, yeah, let me get your email and then I'll just send you the link for the next meeting. Then you can just pop on and see what it's all about. And, maybe it's just that, right? Thinking about inviting people to the party, even though this isn't much of a party, but how can we think about extending that invite to these meetings that let people know that their voice does matter, because we need to hear those people, right? Maybe just the next time that you're at the grocery store, just talk to the person there and just get an idea. Ask them what their name is, where are they coming from. If they say they're coming on the bus, be like, hey, look, I work on this housing commission. Is there any way that you can join this next phone call? I'm very good at talking to people, so don't be surprised if next thing you know, there's a bunch of people on our call next time, because I care. I want to hear them, and I know you guys care as well. So, I'm going to challenge us all to see if we can just talk to 5 people in Menlo Park and just see if we can get more people to join our next phone call. And honestly, just by talking to people, then we're all just going to kind of refine our elevator pitch. And then maybe by next meeting, if we have some success, then people can share what that success looked like. And then member Arlarvia, did you have
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, maybe the next meeting, or if we have time, it would be nice to hear from the committee, like what we would like to see in terms of housing, or like maybe we all have situations that are not, the most awesome in Menlo Park, and what would rectify that. Like, even just kind of understanding each other a little bit more, so we can maybe be on the same page, or at least understand where each other.
Agreed. Christina?
Thank you, Chair. I was just listening to what you were saying about getting folks involved, and I think that is super fantastic. What I was thinking is that, folks are very welcome to the next meetings, and we really want to hear what people have to say. And I think that one of the things that we need to do really soon is to develop like an informational flyer about, or whatever, digital piece of documentation about what this plan is, what the major decisions are that we're going to make. It's not just about housing, it's about these other elements, and just like a basic information sheet, which is, what are we doing and what are we deciding. I do want to say, we really want people to get engaged, and it is fantastic for you all to be talking about getting people engaged in the conversations about housing. I want to point out to folks that, this particular committee is not really focused on like the guts of the housing element decisions. This committee is focused on, how we get people involved in those conversations about the guts of the housing element. And it's not to say that, we won't document your thoughts about housing and what the difficulties are around housing or needs are around housing. But you might want to consider kind of pointing your energy towards getting people to respond to surveys, getting people to participate in focus groups, telling us who to reach out to, giving us names of folks that we should talk to, and then participating in those meetings that are more focused on, on the decisions that we're making, and less on just getting people to be engaged. Because I, super value all of your time, and and I don't want there to be some frustration around like, here we all are and we got all these people together and now we're not, now we're just talking about like, who should we call? Anyway, that was my thought. And again, because I'm an outreach person and you are all here to help us with outreach, I feel like we should have a conversation about like how to best hold these meetings, because we don't, this is a meeting about outreach. And so I feel like we should be kind of using some best practices around helping people feel responded to and engaged and listened to. And so I think as a team, we should really talk about that. And Chair Fennell, we can talk about that. You know, how do we have this be somewhat conversational? Because we want your feedback and we need to be able to ask questions and respond and so on.
Yeah, and before I go to Member Johnson, I guess that's what we kind of need clarity on is, all right, so who would we, so if we do have a flyer, who would create the flyer? And then, so generally, is it like, are we going to make a Google Docs and then people input that? Or are we, you know, like, so if we, like, what is that process, right? Because it's just, you know, anyone can make a flyer, but I'm sure it has to be through official channels. So we just need clarity of, okay, we all want 1,000 flyers and then we all want to be able to just hand them out to our neighbors. But how do we go through the process of designing that? What goes on that flyer and then get it? Okay, so we go to you for you to design that flyer. All right, so that is a tangible action item that we can focus on of what should go on a flyer, what that looks like, handouts, so that, you know, yes, we're not just talking to the random person on the street and they're being like, what? Like, it's just like, there's a little bit, if anyone's worked in sales, there's a little bit more of a comfortable way about going about it, opposed to just like, here's a flyer for you. It's like, no, you know, we can engage them much differently. So real quick, before I go to, can you give us clarity then on how would we go about that then? Should just getting the flyer done?
So, you know, one of the tasks in our long list of things to do is to develop, you know, a number of handouts or information sheets or whatever. And so essentially M Group is responsible for drafting those, for reviewing them with the city, and then running them by you guys, you know, time allowing. It probably won't be that you'll see and get to critique like everything that we put up, like every poster that we put up or whatever. But you guys will generally get to, like with the survey, get to give us feedback on what we've drafted, and then we refine that and have it be ready for distribution. So that's the general flow with our deliverables that are more outreach focused. That make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Member Johnson?
Christina, with all due respect, you're asking us to sell something that we don't know what it is. Right now, the first and only thing so far that I've heard that helps us is what Jeff mentioned about things that are negotiable and things that are not. I still don't know what we are selling. I mean, if I'm just going to go and say, oh, come here, just like Chair Fennell said, to be a good salesperson, you have to understand the product you're selling. You have to, whether you believe in it or not, you still have to be able to sell it, to understand it, to sell it. We need to understand, it's not about a flyer, and we don't want to get into your business because you guys are the experts in designing this stuff. But for us to share that and try to sell the message of participation, I would have to keep my face straight and be credible and say, hey, come, because there are some things that you can influence. They're going to say, well, what can I influence, Judy? I still don't know. And I like to actually, again, raise what Jeff said. I like to see what he has done, which you guys already know. Share that with us, because that's the most influential, the strongest piece of the information, document or social media, I don't really care the format, that I can actually use to convince somebody to participate. Without that, nothing else really matters. And you guys know it, we don't know. I'm just asking you to please share it.
Yeah, so right now there's nothing for you to sell, that, you know, and of course we're not selling anything. But right now what we're asking for you to do is to give us feedback on the marketing strategy for a product, you know, that we're developing language around, to just continue your analogy. So yes, what we need to do is we need to kind of clarify what we're doing with the housing element, what all the points were that Jeff was making, and then say, you know, how do you guys all think that we should go out to the community? And we're not ready yet. Like, what we're trying to do right now is work with you all to make sure that we have an approach that we all agree on before we try to invite anybody to participate in a survey. And there's nothing that's going to happen next week, for example, that we're asking.
That you do that, but you cannot develop a strategy. You guys have been working at this for a long time. You guys are the experts. I'm not. The point is that unless you know what you're going to be engaging in selling. Selling is just a general use of a word. You cannot develop a strategy. Strategy for selling a car is different than a strategy for selling a medical device. These are different products, different strategies. We need to at least understand what is the ultimate purpose. What are the things that people are, we're not going to go ahead and right now give them a pamphlet or anything. I understand that. But for us to engage in the process so that we respect everybody's input, passion, and time, is that we have to understand what it is that people can influence, what things they can. That's a very simple question. Because without that, nothing really matters. If they cannot influence anything, all of this is not relevant. And I know they can, that's why you guys are here. But that message to us, at least to me, is not clear. There's no reason why M Group cannot share with us that ultimately number of units are set by the state and we can affect zoning, we can affect, I don't know, number of stories that go up in a particular parcel, in a particular zoning area. We can have mixed housing here, we can't. Those are the things I'm asking for. I'm not asking for anything secret or unreasonable, in my opinion. I may be wrong because I'm asking it. I obviously think it's reasonable. But again, I'm not saying to put the cart before the horse, but I really need to really internalize what it is that people can influence. And without that, nothing else matters. The rest is just process without final results.
Great, so thank you. Yes, I feel like we've heard you say that a couple times, so it's clear to us that we should, we gave the outline of what's, what the project is in the last meeting, so we can work on, putting that into bullet points and articulating what the decision points are. And Jeff, I saw you pop up. Did you have something you wanted to add? Sorry, Chair, through the chair.
Jeff, did you have something, or I was going to comment?
No, sorry, I was just playing with my buttons here.
So I was going to just kind of go back to kind of what Member Johnson was saying. I guess it's just kind of like, how are we influencing? What is it that we're influencing? And then I also kind of like wanted to know, so what are you guys asking for us right now? What feedback are you asking from us right now? What is it that you want to hear from us?
Can I take a shot at the first part of that question, Chair Fennell?
Yep.
So the council created this committee to advise the staff and the consultants on how to approach this project from the community engagement point of view, how to most effectively engage the community in this process that has been pointed out can look rather bureaucratic and regulated and slightly boring, to some people. But in my view, the council has basically taken a step towards creating sort of an official city sanctioned community organizing group, which is you guys. And I just got done reading Barack Obama's book about how he started out as a community organizer in Chicago, where he had to go where he didn't have to, he chose to go door to door and really, create a strong sense of community and common purpose in the areas that he was working. And that was outside of any official government agency or charter. So in this case, the council has said, hey, we really want the community to be engaged with this. We don't want this to be a checkbox exercise where the consultants say, we've had 6 focus groups, we've had 3 community meetings, we did a survey and got 12% response rate, we're done. That would probably meet the requirements for community outreach that are required under the state laws that govern housing elements. They really want the community to be involved in an authentic grassroots way. And so to Chair Fennell's point about, individually going out and being an ambassador for this process, and the thing we're selling and trying to convince people to do is to engage with the process, not knowing exactly what the end result is going to be. But the more people, the higher degree to which people do engage with the process gives them greater control over what that outcome is, or greater influence over the final decisions that are made by the Housing Commission, recommending to the Planning Commission, recommending to the City Council. So there will be frustrations, and there will be people who don't clearly see exactly how their input affects the final decision, but there really is a genuine desire to get people engaged in a process that will make a significant difference in how the city looks and feels, and who can afford to live here and who can't afford to live here over the next 5, 10, 20 years. So I think, and we'll definitely put together factual information about what is fixed in stone essentially, and things that the city has greater control over and more flexibility to address demands and requests and trends that are identified by the community. But I think the high level message is really, this is a big deal because we all love the community. We care how it turns out. We want our friends and neighbors to have a safe and affordable place to live. And this is an official way to organize the community in a way that moves in that direction.
Thank you. And I'm aware of the time, so I'm just going to go to member Alarvia, and then we'll do a time check and go from there.
I just had a question. I didn't know if we answered it or not. Are we going to do subcommittees?
Deanna, do you have a, did you address that already? Audio.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, the CEOC can create an ad hoc subcommittee. I think if we do that, we would want to make sure that we have a specific purpose for the subcommittee before we select members and what their charge is, so that they can work outside of this forum and then come back and report to the larger group. I'm not sure if we have something specific that has been identified, but we're happy to entertain ideas if Chair Fennell would like to.
Vice Chair Member Alarvia, is your hand still up?
Yes, I was just going to say that if we do subcommittees, I feel one should be outreach to owners, to find a way to engage them in this process. That would be an interesting.
Housing owners?
Yeah. Like, how do we get house owners in Menlo Park engaged in this process?
Member Tronson, do you have any suggestions? Is this just like one subcommittee, and would it be like housing renters and community workers?
That would certainly sound good. What would interest me is understand what the city can contribute to the housing in terms of properties it owns or controls.
So
that's within the scope.
Properties. So would it be 2 subcommittees, or would it be a subcommittee that reaches out to housing owners, community workers, renters?
Well, in a way it would be similar, but we would be reaching to the city itself instead of to the house property owners. We would be reaching to the city to get a better understanding of the properties and how can they, if at all, be included into the housing opportunity.
So through the chair, if I may make a suggestion, I want to be mindful of the subcommittees related to the charge of the CEOC. And so looking at housing sites or policy would be something that we will be exploring, as part of the larger community meetings, as part of our feedback with our Housing Commission, Planning Commission, and City Council. And so I wouldn't want this group to focus on policy where that's not the charge, or the subcommittees to focus on policy issues where that's not the charge of the CEO.
I wasn't implying to set the policy whatsoever. If it came across that way, I apologize. That wasn't the intent. But this was to understand, because housing element actually has surplus property as one of its little mini things in its report. So I wanted to understand what are the properties within the city. What is the proper process for just understanding, not setting the policy, but understanding what is the process for setting surplus property, and what are the potential things that the city can contribute to, not to set the policy whether it should or should not.
So like available so like available locations, so a subcommittee that goes to the city and says, hey, what are the available locations that are able to be built
Or they may
on?
not be available, Chair, but just to at least know what they are. So for example, if they're zoned to be, if they're designated to be zoned different, just again, from information, not to set policy. We are not making recommendations at all. Rather just understanding.
Just understanding so that that subcommittee is able to come back and be like, hey, we know of this location, this location, this location, because we've talked to the city and these are the available locations, and just already caught up to speed on that.
Right, again, may not be available from the city's perspective for housing, but at least that is something we can, I mean, because that is part of housing element, is it not? That's my understanding, and if it's, I misunderstand.
Through the chair, is there a, could I think the past housing element has did an evaluation of all of those areas, right? Whether it's city owned or the kind of the most applicable and quick upzoning opportunities, right? And they were west, super west, east, and all the different locations, but starting there, I think would be the best point if a subcommittee started off of that document and then said, what else is there now? What's changed?
No, that's perfect, Rich. If I have asked for such a document, but I haven't been provided with one yet, this is before the housing element. So if there is such a document available, that would be a perfect place, because the city does all the hard work already. So that would be, so if you know which one it is, I would really appreciate you letting us know.
Can I jump in at some point?
Yeah.
Sure. And then I'm sorry, one more thing, Chair, in terms of other subcommittees would be the questions that can drive action, whether it's through survey, in-person door-to-door knocking. At some point, we have to come up with review the question. That would be the other subcommittee I would suggest.
Okay, and then we're gonna go to member Robledo and just time check. Maybe we'll go like 10 more minutes. 5-10 minutes.
I'm in favor of some subcommittees, and one of them is to review the survey. The other is, I'm a little confused on the M group, because I feel like in one sense, they're saying they're creating everything, and then we're getting the input, when I thought we were gonna sort of create these things. Because the surveys to me are gonna be relevant for my community as a whole, based on what I think the question should be. And so that's, something I'm concerned about. And outreach-wise, I think there's a lot. I got a lot I've written here, so I'm going to try to keep it, condensed. But I think the neon sign things have been really effective when there's certain things going on in the community. The big neon signs that get throughout the city. And then again, what everybody's been saying, the outcome of the meetings. We're saying a lot. And then the effectiveness. And then the elevator pitch, that has to be short and sweet. And Jeff mentioned, like if we're going to be doing pitches, we have to know things to say that are going to be quick, short and sweet, and like maybe so many questions like, did you know about the 8-year plan for housing? What are your current concerns? Things that are going to lure them in to participate, and then they'll hear when they're in the meetings, more of the meat of it. Because I would be curious how we could get people that had to move out of Menlo Park but want to be back into Menlo Park, and what's the availability for them to eventually be able to buy. So, again, I want to know that my input is not already being, like, in other words, that the M group hasn't already created their own plan and then we're giving input. That's important to me, because I don't want to waste my time on a committee that things have already been somewhat decided. I'm not saying that's the case. But, they say, no, they have a survey already and they're going to create a flyer. I want to see all that before I have them distributing that. And I'm not saying they're not saying. I want to make sure that I see what the survey is going to be, the type of questions. That's where I want to see a subcommittee. Maybe we just have to meet once and we create a survey of the questions we think are relevant to the community. Because what people might think is relevant in District 5 is not relevant in Belhaven. So that's my 2 cents for now. Thank you.
Thank you, member Robledo. Member McMahon, is that how we say it?
I know. McManahan,
McMahon.
No, it's McMahon.
You have your input though.
Max, I feel like you know me, but anyway, I am really interested in what everyone's saying in terms of like, what is the actual charter of this group? What is this committee supposed to be doing? And it seems to me that the process of doing the 8-year plan or the community housing element, I was just looking at the website from the state of California. It's big and complicated, it's bureaucratic, and it puts a huge amount of pressure on a community to go execute some plan, go do some plan to create housing stock. So I think it's necessarily the case that M Group has the knowledge and the expertise in the legal and the process side of things, and they seem to know a lot about doing community outreach at sort of that abstract level, all these different approaches and things like that. I think our job is to take what it is that they create and to make sure that it matches our community, for us to provide insight of how our community operates and who's in it and things like that. And then to add those little customizations, into that process that they're already creating, so that we can make sure that we get the best darn result that can then move to the planning committees or the next level of committee that then begins crafting the actual, it's like you pass a law and then you got to get the code out to how to operate the law. And I see us as sort of creating that approach to knowing our community better and making sure that M Group has the best, most focused tools to gather that information. And by the way, I do own the domain shutupdan.com, so you can just say that at any time if you think I'm saying too much at this point. So I think our job is to advise them what are the most appropriate, best set of questions and best approaches. How do we reach the underserved communities or the hidden communities? And I think that's kind of the level that I view us as operating. A lot of the comments coming from Trudy and everyone else about things like, so what is our pitch? What is our elevator pitch? What do we say? How do we present ourselves as we go out into the community to help them, gather the data through M Group's various procedures and events that they have created or will create. So it's our job to customize what it is they're doing. So I'm not certain that we're going to be specifically at the policy level. I think we're at the level of getting the best information to influence the policy. And that is all I have to say. Shutupdan.com.
Thank you, Member Dan.
Now, if I may just jump in, I know it's getting much later than we had anticipated, and I see some of our members may be needing to log off, and I don't see, at least on a quorum of the members who are displayed on the camera. So I want to be mindful of that as well, so that we're not conducting business. We do not have a quorum of the CEOC. So if we want to see if members can pop back on, or I think we will need to.
If you need my face, I can always pop it on.
We need 8 faces, right?
It's like 8:15 right now,
5,
y'all.
6, 7. I think, yeah, I see.
My strongest feeling about this is that we have respectful time expectations around this.
Can't hear.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Member Dan.
Oh,
I mean, no, we can hear you talking just a little bit louder.
oh, sorry. Just that we can have respectful time expectations around these things, and we can keep to it, because then that will keep us either all on video on when we need it, and then just people can then accordingly. That would be my biggest request.
Agreed. And I think this is a good place for us to wrap up. I think something that we should all kind of work on for our next meeting is kind of, working on our own elevator pitch. I understand that sometimes it does help to have a flyer, but I think this is just a good opportunity for us just to safely re-engage with our neighbors and just find a way to invite them and see what works on our end of just talking to someone, and then just by talking to people, we will be able to kind of refine what kind of worked best for you. And then if we have people that show up by the next meeting, then we'll be able to share with each other what was successful, that was able to get people. I think obviously the biggest thing is interacting with someone and then figuring out a way to send them a link, so sometimes that might be a little bit off-putting of being like, hey, work on this commission and here, like, I get your email. But I think it's worth it for us just to give it a go and see, in the next couple of days, if you could just talk to some people and invite them to the next meeting, which I believe is June 10th, right? I believe it's June 10th, next Thursday at 6.
If we're inviting people to a meeting, why are we inviting them? We have to have a real good, solid reason why we're having them. It's like for the 8-year.
Well, no,
Eight-year
so
plan, is that what we're telling them?
Because I do want to be mindful of people's time, but if I can throw on my sales hat, and if you're going to throw me in the fire, if I'm just going to go talk to my neighbor, and if we're just going to role play this real quick, if I'm out walking my dog, or if I'm at Safeway, or if I just walk down the street because I'm listening, I might just wave to my neighbor and be like, hey, actually, no, never mind. I talked to a neighbor today. And sadly, I forget her name, but I was walking my dog. And I was just like, oh, hey, I'm Max Deneau. I'm working on this housing commissions for Menlo Park, right? So just looking for that easy gateway of when you just bump into someone, or, especially I think the easiest is if you're out for a coffee or Safeway and you just talk to an individual and just say like, hey, like, what are you doing? Where are you from? Like,
That's
work
not
on
the
this
issue.
housing.
The issue is getting them to want to listen. I have no problem talking to people. It's why do I want them to participate? What is it for them? Is what I'm getting at.
So that's what I'm getting to, because I think it's just important for just to kind of have an idea of like what that role play is, how you would realistically interact with someone. But what you're sharing with them is that the same reason of why you're here, right? Look at yourself and ask yourself what brought you here, and then kind of think about why would it bring someone there. There's a lot of people that want to just vent and say like, hey, I'm frustrated that rent's extremely high. I'm very frustrated that I don't have a place to buy. Or
we can't change that on this housing element.
Well, but this commission's created so that we can amplify their voices. So I think that's what's good. You're helping us refine that. So we are going to invite them so that they can have a place to voice what it is that they need to voice, and then we are going to then amplify that voice and advocate on their behalf.
Okay. All right, I gotta go, y'all.
Yep. Oh, well, I think we just
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is translation available during, or any type of like, this is a transcript also, like I can support with any translation if needed for flyers and so on, but if someone does come to the meeting and attend, will there be someone from the city who can translate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right. I think that's it for this meeting, and we will see you at the next one.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
all. Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Good stuff.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
You too.